from D.C. All right, here's the question. Clarence Thomas, President Trump. Who else did you have last? Oh, General Kelly. So who did you use tonight to outbook us and make us look bad like we don't do our job?
Paul Ryan.
Okay, I had him a couple of weeks ago, so I feel better.
Yeah. By the way, I had Kevin Sorba and his wife on radio a couple days ago.
Yeah.
They were so fabulous. I'm so excited for your movie.
Did you see the movie?
I haven't seen it yet. I was away this weekend.
Didn't see the movie? I'll email you the movie. You don't have to leave your house.
Give me a screener, Hannity. I don't get any respect from
you. Oh, you won't go to it. You won't pay. I'll give you the $15. Well, you have a pretty big family. I'll give you the $100.
No, I'm going to go support and take my kids. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for doing the film.
You had a great debut week. We're very proud of you. Thanks for your hard work, and you better take it from here. I want to go home. I'm done. Have a good show.
See you later, Hannity. Great to see you. And good evening from Washington. I am Laura Ingraham. Thanks for joining us tonight. Pure evil. That what was on display yesterday morning inside the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, when a gunman opened fire and killed 26 and wounded 20 during Sunday service. The victims, they ranged from 18 months old to 77 years old and included the pastor's 14-year-old daughter. The killer, 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly, I don't even want to use his name, began shooting with an AR-15 style rifle around 11:30 a.m., 30 minutes after the service began. Kelly then entered the sanctuary and gunned down his victims, many at point-blank range. Authorities collected hundreds of shell casings from the church and 15 empty magazines that held 30 rounds each. Joining us now to shed light on this horrific story from Sutherland Springs, Mike Jordan, whose son witnessed the attack and who's close friends with the man who confronted this killer and likely prevented more carnage. And from Houston, Texas's Attorney General, Ken Paxton. Mike, let's talk to you first. Your son, who came face-to-face with the killer, is so distraught. I mean, he was originally scheduled to join us tonight, and I don't blame him one bit for being too distraught and too, frankly, just don't want to deal with this anymore. So thank you, sir, for joining us. Please tell us how he is coping and what he has told you about what he came face-to-face with.
Well, he's coping with it. It's difficult. A lot of his friends, people that he's known all of his life, died in this tragedy yesterday. And we've been interviewed, one interview after another, and he's just to the point after going to the vigil that was, here in Sutherland Springs earlier, he's to the breaking point. I mean, he narrowly dodged 3 bullets that went through his house, and my grandson, his son, was in the house like 4 feet away from one of the bullets that came through their wall. So he's out of it. He's coping with it, but he'll be okay. But it's going to take some time.
Did he go into the church at all himself?
He did after the shooter had been, after the shooter actually was engaged by another person and left the scene. My son has some medical training. He did go into the church to try to help, do what he could, to help the wounded, anybody he could help.
And I know I saw him in one interview where he said, I can't even verbalize what I saw. That's how bad and grisly it was. And the victims, very young to very old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we had children that were killed. We had elder that were killed. One person that was a very good friend of my daughter's, actually, her entire family was killed in this incident. So
8 people in one family.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And, to walk in and see that and to know after the effect that he saw that, and find out later that these people are people he knew. People that him and my daughter grew up with. It's really hard to deal with. It really is.
Let's go bring in the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. Ken, again, Texas has been through a lot with natural disasters. Of course, the hurricane, the flooding, and now this. How is the community there coping, and what potential policy changes or anything can you do on a governmental level, given the mental health of this individual and what we now know that the Air Force did not do after he was subjected to court-martial? His name was not entered into a background check registry as it should have been. What are the authorities in Texas saying tonight?
Well, first of all, Texans are very resilient. They're just an amazing group of people. You saw how they handled the hurricane and the flooding that occurred over a week-long period of time, and how well I think Texans both organized and also just came to the rescue, both in the original aftermath and then just through the weeks. This is going to be no different. We'll stand behind these people. You'll see lots of support from the state. You'll see lots of support from charities, from individuals, and I think that ultimately, we'll be here for those people for a long time. As far as what we can do, I mean, we have laws on the book right now that basically stop people in a technical sense from carrying in a church now. I think for small churches, we're going to have to change the law to make it more clear that you can carry in a church, so that this gives first responders time to show up, especially in a rural community where it might take, 10, 15, 20 minutes to get to a site. So I think we're going to have to rethink this and have churches and businesses and schools think about how they're going to deal with this in the future.
It's against the law in Texas to bring a gun into a church? Is that what you're saying?
So the way it works now is that you cannot bring a concealed weapon into a church. However, the church has to provide you notice. So if you're just reading the statute, you would see yourself as maybe not being able to do it. But the truth is, you can do it unless you're given notice. I think we need to make that more clear, because it's likely that people don't carry because of the way they read the statute.
And Michael, from what you've been able to discern, was anyone in that church, anyone who survived, was anyone carrying? I mean, I would be surprised in Texas if there wasn't an individual in that church who had carried a firearm into the church. The law or no law, whatever, that's a kind of an odd law, but I mean, they were hit from behind, so they had no chance to react, even if they had a gun. Maybe they had tactical weapons training, but I mean, it's pretty hard to react when you're being shot at from behind.
Well, one of the points here, there was a individual that my son knew personally. Normally he carries, but small town like this, people show up to church, they disarm, leave their guns in the car, because you don't expect something like this to happen. And this particular day, his wife stayed home. She wasn't feeling good, so he left his firearm with her, said, I'm going to go ahead and go to church today. Well, he survived. Fortunately, he was grazed by one of the bullets, but he survived. And as he put it, what if this was the day that he didn't leave that firearm at home? What if he did take it with him? What if he did conceal while he was in that church? I mean, yes, you have a psycho shooting from the outside in, but think about that. If you have one person on the inside that is armed to return fire, it may not have stopped people from dying, but it would have stopped that many people from dying. It would have been a distraction. It would have got the guy's attention that, hey, somebody's shooting at me, what do I do now?
Well, Mike, what the left, the American left is saying, many in the left are saying, is that Republicans have blood on their hands because they're bought and paid for by the NRA. That's what they're saying tonight.
Really? Well, that's amazing, because the NRA has lots of great programs for children. They teach, firearm training. The NRA, Republicans, no one's responsible for this, and the left keeps putting blame. Let me put it this way. Today, a very good friend of mine yesterday, a very good friend of mine engaged the shooter with his AR-15. He ran from his home to the shooting site, less than a block from the house here. He engaged the shooter with his AR-15, and he shot the guy. We know for a fact he shot him at least 2 to 3 times. It stopped the guy. It stopped him. From that point, the shooter then ran, got in his vehicle. My friend shot him again. They pursued, and later down the road, after a chase, the guy crashed, and that was the end of it. But we think about it this way. Yes, we lost 20. Right now, the count is 26 people that we lost yesterday in this tragedy. But there was many more people in that church that, if he had not engaged that shooter with his firearm, if the liberals have their way, and we're not able to protect ourselves, and he was not able to do what he did, think about how many more people would have died. And my son, who lived across the street, think about what would have happened there. What if that guy had pursued him, his wife, and my grandson? The tragedy could have been twice as bad.
Mike and Ken, thank you so much for joining us, both of you. As we just heard,
you.
when the gunman emerged from the church, 2 brave civilians gave chase. On the left is Johnny Langendorf. He was driving by the scene and saw the gunman exchanging fire with this man on the right, Stephen Lilliford. He's a former NRA instructor who engaged the gunman. And last year, there were 276 cases of justifiable homicide in the United States. In other words, a good guy with a gun stopped an aggressor 276 times. Joining us now from New York with more on the importance of this is Brandon Webb, a former Navy SEAL and a self-defense expert. Brandon, it's good to see you. You heard it from Mike Jordan, whose son came face to face with this depraved killer, demonic. I have to use that word demonic tonight because he's
Sure.
demonic. He came face to face with him, and his father said, thank God we have good people who are proficient in firearms use and who were able to use their gun to stop him potentially from doing a lot more damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in most states where you have favorable gun laws, the chances of citizens engaging and stopping a situation like this is a lot better than states with very restrictive gun laws. You look at, in 2012, there was a gunman that stormed a church in South Carolina, and an armed churchgoer prevented a mass shooting in that situation. So, you know, I've trained a lot of snipers in the SEAL teams from Texas, and one thing they do all have in common is they can shoot straight. So I think that what that plumber did to stand up and really take action and engage that shooter, that guy's a hero.
Brandon, if you are in a place like a church and you're looking forward and someone's shooting at you from behind, and it's obviously you're not expecting to get shot when you go to church or anywhere where you're peacefully gathered. Someone who has, let's say you're carrying a 9mm 45, you're carrying it, you know how to use it. It's still very difficult in that circumstance, is it not? With all that chaos, to have the you have to have the training to drop, roll, assume your position, and try to take out a shooter who you might not be able to see, correct?
Correct. The thing in these situations that I was last year at JFK when they had a mass shooting situation, and I was off a plane from Germany, 400 or 500 people in the terminal, complete chaos. But the one thing that was clear to me, you have to take personal responsibility to get yourself out of that situation. And in the military, when you're ambushed, we call it, you have to get off the X. So you need to really to think, make a quick assessment, and then take action, because just sitting there is not going to do any good. So the fact, you know, that you're in this horrible situation where you've been ambushed, you know, it's a terrible situation. But you know, the state of the world we live in, and I'm in New York City. We have that crazy guy running people over on Halloween. It's just, people have to be better prepared. And so I think they need to think about these situations beforehand and talk to their family members and say, look, if we're in a situation where this crazy person is doing something like this, this is the plan. And it's as simple as just assessing a situation and taking action and creating distance from the hostility.
And would you recommend to women, especially women today, be responsible or try to be responsible for your own safety? And whether it's firearms training, self-defense training, get trained. Know how to protect yourself. Would you recommend that today?
Yeah, absolutely. We you know, the media company I run, we do a lot of content on how to be better prepared. We have a gear club that's called the Crate Club that's exactly themed to be better prepared. And today, you know, with that JFK situation I was in, we created this bulletproof insert for backpacks and messenger bags, because after I was in that situation, I would at least want some sort of shield that I can just put in a bag and have with me all the time. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of things you can carry and read up on.
All right, Brandon, we appreciate it. Thanks so much. And when we come back,
Laura.
how offering thoughts and prayers for the victims of the Texas church attack is turning into a new battleground for religious bigotry. Stay tuned. Elite hostility to people of faith. That's the subject of tonight's Angle. In the aftermath of the church massacre in Texas, all of us were outraged and heartbroken. Across social media, politicians and concerned Americans everywhere remembered the victims and offered the grieving families of Sutherland Springs their thoughts and prayers. But almost immediately, celebrities and certain media types rushed to ridicule and demean that religious sentiment. Actor Michael McKean, in a tweet, wrote, "They were in church. They had the prayer shot right out of them. Maybe try something else." Stephen King, whose Dark Tower series features a gunslinger, he tweeted, "Enough with praying. Time to start legislating." The hostility to faith infects the popular culture. There is militant secularism moving throughout the country that not only disparages people of faith, but targets them because of it. Entertainment and media elites caricature people like those in that church in Sutherland Springs as intolerant, backwood yahoos. They're Bible thumpers, when they're actually among the best of America. They may not be the fancy people out on the red carpets or in the gym with their personal trainers, but when the chips are down and help is needed, they'll put their own lives on the line, pick up a long gun if needed, and go save their neighbors. If you pay close attention, these elites are not only trying to politicize this tragedy, but they're disparaging the faith of the people killed in those pews. Actor Will Wheaton, responding to Speaker Paul Ryan's call for prayer, he wrote, "The murdered victims were in a church. If prayers did anything, they'd still be alive. You worthless sack of..." So prayer is incapable of doing anything. What, if they were having brunch at the Peninsula Hotel with their managers, they might still be here? Is that your point, Will? No wonder he spells his name with only one L. It's William, 2 L's. The intolerance of religion, it's penetrated every corner of the culture. When esteemed Notre Dame law professor Amy Barrett was nominated to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, she was grilled by Democratic senators, not really for her legal reasoning, not so much, but for her Catholic faith. Dick Durbin asked if she considered herself an Orthodox Catholic. He didn't mention that she has 7 children, but he might as well have. Senator Dianne Feinstein went even further. She suggested that, quote, "the dogma lives loudly within you, and that's a concern." Can you imagine either of those senators trying that on a Muslim court nominee? No, they wouldn't. Despite the religious hazing, Barrett was confirmed last week. Good. This is an intimidation campaign that has been tried and tried again, even on yours truly. I didn't even know about this, by the way, until a few days ago, but following the debut of this show last week, a bright light at something called theobserver.com dubbed me the church lady. Church lady was pretty funny, by the way, because I, quote, appeared before the audience in purple vestments, that's a dress, by the way, that highlighted the gleaming gold cross on my chest. Here it is. It's really powerful. As expected, the cross-hating author is a former New York Times employee and a segment producer for Keith Olbermann. Figures. Last week, a high school football coach in Georgia was told that he can't participate in any student-initiated or student-led prayer before or after or during a football game. So he can't pray at all in his official capacity as a coach. The Coweta County School Board directive came only after the Freedom From Religion Foundation filed a complaint. You see, the atheists aren't happy unless they're trampling on another person's religious liberty. We'd better be very careful. Remember, the Declaration of Independence, ever heard of it? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our natural rights are not dependent on the government, but on God. That is what undergirds this country and, frankly, what sustains us. And for those of you who don't agree, you're in my thoughts and prayers. Get over it. That's the angle. And joining us now with reaction here in Washington is talk show host Jamila Bey, and from New York, Jerry Murray, pastor at the Church of the Holy Family. Welcome to both of you. Now, I didn't even know about this goofy Observer guy, this columnist in the Observer, who apparently is offended by a cross that I've been wearing for, I don't know, how long? 10 years? 15 years. It was stolen once, so I had it replaced. But apparently, you can wear, sleeve tattoos and a nose ring. But if you wear a cross, then you're somehow a threat. Jamila, you are a well-known atheist. You're quoted often in the New York Times and so forth. Tell me what I got wrong in my angle.
Well, I don't think you got a whole lot wrong. I just think you didn't go far enough. Here's the thing. We are indeed allowed to be with religion, without religion. That's what the First Amendment, one of the many great things the First Amendment affords us as Americans. But let me ask you this. Your kid needs medical treatment, and the doctor says, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. It is against my personally held religious belief that I give your child a transfusion. Let us pray while he bleeds out and dies. How do you feel about that?
Well, that's not government action.
Okay,
and
okay.
That's obviously.
That's not government action.
Let's focus on the issue at hand.
Okay.
Because I want you to react to this idea that an individual who is a person of faith can or should be routinely mocked, ridiculed, and intimidated and grilled for that faith by sitting senators who are in the Senate when a daily prayer is read, when Senate convenes every day. Why should they be able to grill her on her faith? They would never grill an individual on other things, sexual orientation, religious, racial background, ethnic background. In fact, if that was done rightly, they would be condemned. But someone's faith, it's open season on faith. Why is that the case? Why is that okay?
It's not okay to grill someone because they have a religious belief, because they come from a faith tradition. It's wrong to discriminate because of that. It absolutely needs to be pointed out and said, hey, are you capable of legislating in a beneficial way for all Americans, for those who don't believe that Jesus died for your sins? Can you legislate fairly?
Your dad was a Muslim and your mom's a Catholic.
And I'm confused.
That's
yeah,
fun.
I mean, it is. I married a person whose background is Jewish.
Wow,
I love everybody.
I
I mean, people are great, and I personally see no evidence of a god or gods or whichever in the sky. However, if you love America, if you love Americans, you have to allow us to be free of that.
Oh,
enjoy that.
I celebrate your ability to be different and think differently. I have no problem with that. I don't like, and Father Murray, I need you to get in on this. I don't like the fact that we have in our society an increasing willingness, mostly among elites, to ridicule and demean those who are believers. And you see it in films, you see it in television shows, you see it in sometimes columns. I don't really care about this stupid column, but it's just fun. I mean, to me, it's like hilarious. This is all you got, that I wear a cross? Ooh. Take it away.
Yeah, well, the point, Laura, is quite clear. Religion, and specifically Christianity, I'll speak as a Catholic priest, is viewed as a threat by so many in the liberal establishment because they think the Christian way of life is preventing them from getting what they want. And of course, Christians, we pray for our neighbors, we pray for those who disagree with us, but atheism is not the path that we need to follow. And for those people to mock, those commentators to mock the people who were in church praying, they were killed by a self-proclaimed atheist, I note. And people say, well, where was God? Well, God was the one they were praying to, and God will give them their eternal reward. But a world without God is the world where people take guns up with no fear of eternal damnation, and they commit a horrible crime. Now, Laura, you deserve credit for wearing your cross because you're simply proclaiming, this is how I live, this is how I believe. There's nothing offensive about that. Those who take offense are really just trying to promote their own way of life.
Agreed.
And Jamil, I would say that those tweets in response to Paul Ryan, in response to all Americans who just said, we're praying for the victims. It is a level of nastiness that is, there is no place for it. No place for it.
Here's the thing I need you to understand, Laura. Okay.
We're out of time, unfortunately. But my point here is that if you disagree, fine. Try to be a little bit more agreeable when you disagree.
Legislation.
We need legislation. No, you know what we need?
We need
people to understand that the nation was founded on godly principles.
We need prayer
Otherwise,
and
we have no
respect.
declaration. We have no Declaration of Independence. We have no country without the Almighty, because He endowed us with certain inalienable rights. And I know some people
Amen,
don't believe
Laura.
that, but that is our declaration. Then you don't really believe in the country if you think it's all a crock. Do you believe that's a crock? That whole beginning of the Declaration?
I think we need to drill down on what is a creator, and since
Okay.
we're out of town,
All right.
bring me back and
Oh, we will. Okay, guys, sorry.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
I gave you both short shrift. As we just mentioned, the left lashed out at Paul Ryan for sending his thoughts and prayers to the victims of the Texas church shooting. And Speaker Ryan joins with us, his reaction to the tragedy right after this. House Speaker Paul Ryan is leading the Republican charge to take on that daunting task of passing tax reform. This evening, I spoke with Speaker Ryan in his office about it, but first we began with his reaction to yesterday's horrific shooting in Texas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for spending some time with us tonight.
Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you so much. Another really difficult day for the country yesterday. The Texas church killer.
Right.
It turns out he was separated from the Air Force for bad conduct.
That's right.
Did a year in the brig, in prison, and then the Air Force never put his name
Right.
on the instant background check. So he was able to buy 4 guns. What should happen
And
as
he
a
was
result
convicted
of
of
this?
domestic abuse.
Yeah,
And so-
domestic abuse, child abuse. What should be done
Right.
so that this never happens
So he wasn't
again?
supposed to get a gun in the first place because we have laws on the books that prevent people like that from getting guns. So that's what's frustrating about this is the laws are there on the books, but you got to execute the law. You got to follow through the law. You got to apply the law.
Should there be consequences to the Air Force?
Well, yeah. So that's what the Air Force is doing, a quick scramble. And what the heck just happened? What went wrong? And are there other
Like
people that
26
slipped
people
through the
dead
cracks?
because
Yeah.
someone didn't put them in the
Right.
The
So
Pentagon
the
didn't.
law is on the books to prevent a person like this from getting a gun, and that didn't happen. And we've got to get to the bottom of why that did not happen. And yes, there are a lot of questions the Air Force has to answer on that.
Should anyone who ever is separated from the military with a dishonorable or bad conduct discharge, regardless of whether they do time or not, should they be able to buy a firearm?
Well, there are dishonorable discharges, and there are just other kinds of discharges.
Yeah.
So I think you got to
Or
be
bad
careful.
conduct.
You got to
Okay.
be careful what that means. And so, but this was domestic abuse. So we have laws in the books
Yeah.
that people convicted of domestic abuse can't buy a gun.
Yeah, if this happened
So
during-
this is pretty clear cut
Yeah.
case.
The result of all of this is, of course, in social media, people are always going crazy. People are saying horrible things, frankly. You sent out a tweet calling for the prayers, which many of us did. The reaction in the celebrity world to your call for prayers from Michael McKeon, Will Wheaton, others, basically saying, essentially, this is the Republicans' fault, and they were praying. And maybe it's time to do something other than pray, Speaker Ryan. Blaming the GOP.
It's disappointing. It's sad. And this is what you'll get from the far secular left. People who do not have faith don't understand faith, I guess I'd have to say. And it is the right thing to do is to pray in moments like this because, look, prayer works. And I know you believe that and I believe that. And when you hear the secular left doing this thing, no wonder you've got so much polarization and disunity in this country when people think like that.
It turns out the man who was the hero in this was an NRA member and knew how to use a weapon and probably saved the lives of many others. The criticism from Schumer, Pelosi, et cetera, is Republicans are bought and paid for by the NRA, and that's why we'll never ban bump stocks or AR assault type weapons. You say?
Well, look, the bump stock issue, the Judiciary Committee is working with the ATF on that alone, that issue. But do we believe in the Constitution and the Second Amendment rights? Of course we do. So if you're trying to exploit a tragedy to try and infringe on a law-abiding citizen's Second Amendment rights, no, we don't want to do that. But if there's a problem where a person who should not have gotten a gun because they're a domestic abuser, that's something that you've got to make sure that the authorities do their jobs. We have laws in the books for a reason. We need to enforce those laws. We just passed comprehensive mental illness reform, which we think helps get the root cause. But if you want to use a tragedy to try and take away a law-abiding citizen's Second Amendment rights, that's a totally different question altogether.
Let's talk about the tax bill. It's interesting that both on the left and the right, you guys have sustained some pretty big criticisms. The Wall Street Journal at one point, I think it was on the weekend edition, said that this bubble bracket results in tax brackets that are upwards of almost 50%, and that this will ultimately pave the way for even higher brackets. Why did we elect Republicans? Is this Hillary Clinton in office?
We're not for higher brackets. Everyone enjoys a tax cut all across the board. What this quote-unquote bubble rate does is it just says the millionaires don't get the tax cut that is aimed for low and middle-class people, the people in the 12% bracket. So all it is it's saying we want to preserve middle-class tax cuts for middle class, but a person in the top bracket still
1.2
gets
to 1.6
1.1
million?
to 1.1 to 1.2 or something like that.
For couples filing together jointly?
But they still get lower taxes. So that's the point. So look, we don't like high tax rates either, but what we're trying to do is make all of this work, getting taxes down on businesses, for jobs, for leveling the playing field. But the goal of the tax cut is to aim it toward the middle class, and that's what that's all about.
The upper income is not getting a tax cut in this, really. I mean, unless you have like a pass-through,
they're not getting a tax rate cut.
You're not
getting a tax rate cut. Yeah, the president was really clear with us about this. He said, I don't want the top millionaires getting a big rate cut. I want that to go to the middle class. And so we structured a bill to do that.
But isn't that buying into the class warfare mentality? In your Better Way plan, you had a border adjustment tax that would have raised a lot of revenue and allowed for true simplification and true reform. And who was the person who stopped the border adjustment tax, which was criticized as a VAT tax, but which most countries have? Who stopped that?
I'd say it was the retailers, the retail industry. Yeah. We just couldn't get consensus on it. We believe that was the smartest thing to do. I'm a big fan of that. I think it's a smart thing to do to put American businesses on a level playing field with the rest of the world. And it would have gotten us $1 trillion to cut taxes across the board. But that's behind us. We now have consensus. This is the tax cut is an average of $1,182 for the average household in America. That's who this is aimed toward. It's about giving break to the middle class and the people who are living paycheck to paycheck, and then leveling the playing field for American businesses so that they can have higher jobs. Look, at the Tax Foundation just told us this thing's going to create almost 1 million new jobs. It's going to give us more growth, higher wages.
Why'd you change it today? Why did Brady adjust the 2023?
That's just the typical. That's a manager's amendment. He put a bill out there. He got feedback. He applied some of that feedback to the bill. That's part and parcel for the legislative process.
Is it going to retroactivity, though? There's an issue with the retroactivity of
They're looking at all sorts of different things, and it's about making the numbers work and getting the best policy possible and taking feedback from our colleagues about how to improve the bill as best we can.
Do you think rates are too high in the United States?
Of course I do.
Where should they be for everybody?
Oh, look, I'm an old flat taxer. I'm an old Jack Kemp, Steve Forbes flat tax guy. So that bill.
I think it's obscene that any individual can spend this much time working this hard as they do, and they're paying 46% in a certain income bracket. To me, that's just why are Republicans in charge?
But we're still lowering people's taxes. But look at this. We are so dramatically simplifying the tax system. 90% of Americans would get to use this. 9 out of 10 Americans, because of the dramatic overhaul and simplification, getting rid of loopholes, getting rid of carve-outs, and just cutting people's taxes.
If the Senate agrees. That's the big issue.
Well, yeah, a bill's got to pass the House and the Senate.
Speaker Ryan, this is what happened with Obamacare repeal. You actually moved Obamacare
and we passed
repeal.
That bill.
You got it through, and it died in the Senate because you have two people, at least, Senator McCain and Senator Flake, who I believe do not want Donald Trump to be a successful president. That's my belief. You have one more person who votes against it. Maybe it's Langford, and you got no tax reform. How concerned are you that for all this work you guys have been doing, some people still don't like it, but you did something, goes over to the Senate and dies? How worried are you?
I should have brought my other chart in my pocket. We've passed more bills here in the House in the first 10 months of the Trump administration than in Obama, Clinton, and both Bushes.
But what are you going to say to McConnell?
So
they're in work. They work for 3 days a week.
Look, I'm not going to get into their schedule, but here's the deal: this bill cannot be filibustered. The way we wrote this bill, that's the bubble rate and things like that, are because we had to follow the Senate rules, so that this thing cannot be filibustered. And here's what we did differently than health care. We agreed ahead of time what this would look like. We, meaning the House, the Senate, and the President, agreed ahead of time what this thing would look like, what this tax relief would look like, middle-class tax cuts.
How about Flake and McCain? What are they going to do?
They're all part of this discussion.
They are? Okay.
And that's why it's really important that we deliver this for the American people, for the American economy. But more importantly, the fact that we agreed ahead of time what this would look like gives me great optimism that we're going to get this done.
Congressional approval is about 22%, even lower than President Trump is, depending on which poll you look at, about 37%. Why is congressional approval this low?
because we haven't gotten these things in law yet.
Yeah.
So like I said, I can walk you through about 285 bills we passed in the House that are still kind of going through the system. But people want to see differences made. People want to see it get done. They want to see bills on President Trump's desk.
They want to see their lives get better,
things.
don't they?
Yeah, that's my point. That's the final point I was going to say, is the reason we push for these bills is to improve people's lives, to show that there's a big difference for having this unified Republican government. That's why we see ourselves as the engine room of government in Congress. We're working here, getting these things done, pushing them, but we got to get them over the finish line so that people can see a real difference.
The Bushes, over the last 10 days, in different ways, have attacked Donald Trump. George H.W. called him a blowhard. George W. Said, basically didn't like him, didn't know him, gave a speech, veiled attacks on Trump. Do you think that's helpful for the entire Bush family to be leveling these attacks on the current president?
I don't think it's helpful for any Republicans to go after each other. I think we should stay unified. I think we have common principles and common beliefs and priorities that we all agree on. So let's go focus on that and get things done. I see a president who's a risk taker, who's willing to lean out there and get things done. He wants things done yesterday. I think that's good. It shakes up our system a little bit around here.
Well, why are the Bushes so upset?
I have no clue. I haven't talked to them.
Oh, come on, theory. You've been around for 2 decades.
Yeah, but I haven't talked to them about why they're so upset.
Is Bush Republicanism the wave of the future, or is it more of a populist conservatism that's growing across the country?
Things done, prove our principles work, improve people's lives. That's the kind of Republicanism that should unify everybody. It's results Republicanism, results conservatism. That's what I care about, and that's what we're focused on doing.
How's your personal relationship with the president?
Very good. Very good. We talk all the time. I mean, he's in Asia now, so we're not talking, but we talk quite often.
Can you pick up the phone and call him any day?
All the time. I can call him anytime.
Do you ever tell him not to tweet?
He called me out of a tree stand on Saturday morning last week.
So, you're hunting?
Oh, yeah, I'm a big bow hunter. But, yeah, we talk all the time.
And
we talk about everything. We talk about policy. We talk about families. We talk about our kids. We talk about everything.
Speaker Ryan, we really appreciate you taking some time. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks. During our interview with Speaker Ryan, you saw that President Trump was touching down on the Korean Peninsula, the second stop on a trip of great consequence through Asia. We'll bring you updates as they come. But up next, Republican gubernatorial candidate Ed Gillespie is here on the eve of that ever-tightening race in Virginia. Coming up. Tomorrow, voters across the country are heading to the polls, and perhaps the most closely watched race in the battle is in Virginia for governor. Republican Ed Gillespie is trying to score a major upset over Democrat Ralph Northam, and he joins us now from Alexandria. Now that I got the marbles out of my mouth, Ed Gillespie, great to see you. This is a contest that has kind of gone both directions. It's tightened up in recent days. You're ahead in a bunch of polls, narrowly ahead. Tell us what you're going to do to make the lives of the average Virginians better when you're governor.
Well, first of all, I'm going to increase job creation by 25%, and I have a plan to cut our individual income tax rates by 10% across the board, Laura. That has not been done since those tax rates were set in 1972, 45 years ago, and we need those jobs. We need that opportunity. We're stuck here in Virginia. Our economic growth rate right now is 0.6%, and we're 39th out of 50 states in economic growth. Virginia. And I truly believe that when it comes to economic growth and job creation, Virginia should be first in the country. And we can be with the right policies, but we don't have those policies now. And the only way we get them is by winning this election tomorrow. And I'm confident we're going to. I can feel the momentum everywhere we're going. And I've been everywhere over the course of the past, well, certainly the past year, but just in the past week. And I can tell you the crowds have been great, and the enthusiasm and energy and intensity is all on our side right now.
And Ed, when you look at the landscape right now, just among the electorate, there's a lot of anger out there, a lot of fight in the people for a lot of reasons. How does a governor deal with that? I mean, you have the establishment GOP, you have the populists, you have the left, and they have their own problems. How do you deal with it, the anger?
Well, Laura, I deal with it by putting forward policies that I know will be good for all Virginians. And I've got 21 specific detailed policy proposals on my website, edforvirginia.com, that I know will increase job creation here. I know will improve our schools. I know that they'll ease traffic congestion so that we can get home in time for dinner with our families. I know that they will make our communities safer, address the awful opioid and heroin epidemic we're dealing with here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I find that as I talk to my fellow Virginians and I talk about policies and the concerns they have and my solutions to them, you can talk to everybody about that. And I take my campaign to every corner of the Commonwealth and to every voter in Virginia. And I'm well received everywhere because they want to know, what are you for? How are you going to make our life better?
And Ed, I really appreciate your joining us on the eve of the campaign. You didn't campaign with Donald Trump, but Republicans, I think, are uniting and unifying, and we really look forward to reporting this race tomorrow. So thanks so much. And up next,
well,
the Bush family. All right, the Bush family lashes out, and President Trump and I have some thoughts. The Bush's bitter backlash. That's the subject of tonight's bonus angle. Until Donald Trump came along, the Republican Party hadn't won a national election since 2004, when George W. Bush narrowly defeated John Kerry. After that, it was pretty much all downhill. The GOP went on to lose the House, the Senate, and the presidency twice. The nation had become disillusioned by the enormous physical and financial toll of our interventions in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Grassroots voters rose up against George W. Bush's immigration amnesty and his nomination of his pal Harriet Miers to the Supreme Court. But now the Bushes are lashing out at Donald Trump. You saw the recent not-so-veiled hit on the sitting president by George W. Bush. And by the way, neither Bush, we find out, voted for Donald Trump. Well, that's a shock. And George H.W. in a new book called Trump a blowhard. 1,000 points of insult. George W. joined in on the sniping. He said, this guy doesn't know what it means to be president. And his father also said of Trump, I don't like him. I don't know much about him. Not thrilled about him being the leader. Well, this coming from a guy, God bless him, great patriot though, he didn't exactly thrill the voters himself in 1992. To Bush 41 and Bush 43, where were you when we needed you during Obama's 2 terms? We needed you then to speak out against outrages that were being perpetrated on the American public, against Obamacare, after Benghazi. How about when the IRS was targeting conservatives? Where were you when we needed you? Silent, crickets, totally silent. Or did we have to read your lips? George W. is worried that Trump's tenure may mean that we've seen the last Republican president. Funny, huh? That's what all of us thought in 2008, when W was doing the big bailouts, had 26% approval rating, and had us bogged down in 2 wars. Until the Tea Party came around in 2009, conservatives fretted that the country was lost for a generation. The Bush family apparently can't come to terms with the fact that the voters rejected their globalist worldview and have basically moved on. In recent years, the Bush family has become pretty tight with the Clintons and the Obamas. They've found more common ground with them than they have with the grassroots voters in their own party. And if Bush-era policies, let's face it, of open borders and open markets and endless wars was so popular, the former 2-term governor of Florida, he was popular when he was governor too, Jeb Bush, well, he would have handily beaten that political neophyte, Donald Trump, in his home state primary, but, well, we know how that ended, don't we? Low energy indeed. Remember the show Dynasty? It worked in the 1980s because you had Joan Collins and John Forsythe and their leading roles. But the country had had it with the Bush dynasty and what their policies had wrought on America. It wasn't personal, it was the policies. So the voters canceled that political show. No amount of grousing by the bitter Bushes is going to change that. The voters are simply not that into them anymore. What I said in my CPAC speech in February of 2016, and I wrote about in my new book, Billionaire at the Barricades, turned out to be depressingly accurate. Jeb and Hillary should have just dispensed with all the formalities and just run on the same ticket in 2016. Think of the bumper sticker. Would have been pretty catchy. Clush 2016, what difference does it make? All right, that's all the time we have tonight. Shannon Bream is ready to take over from here with Fox